If you guys want, you can put some lyrics in the chat and I'll sing them. Serious. And I'll wait till they come in a little bit.
That was wonderful, Wade. Just beautiful as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great way to start in. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the 4th episode of the Slow Fish Crew Together webinar series. I'm Collis Stoll, and I'm president of One Fish Foundation, a sustainable seafood education nonprofit in Maine. We've just been listening to Wade Fernandez, who's a Crew Together veteran, actually having joined us for the 2nd webinar last spring. He joins us from Wisconsin, and prior to COVID-19, he traveled around the world sharing music and messages from his Menominee Nation background and his culture. So stay tuned for the conclusion of this webinar when we'll hear more songs from Wade. These webinars evolved from the postponement of the Slow Fish 2020 gathering last March. Our mission is to foster a safe and collaborative discussion here, an interactive discussion in a safe environment. We want you to leave this webinar with a stronger sense of the slow fish community here in the US and abroad, and its shared network with Slow Food and other organizations, and our collective mission to promote good, clean, fair seafood by connecting more folks from in and around the supply chain. We hope you'll draw on the courage and resilience you'll witness from storytellers today, and perhaps bring that energy and the overall sense of healing and unity to your own communities. One of our goals for these webinars is to inspire action. And so before we wrap up, we'll have 3 concrete action opportunities that everyone can take. And again, we want to rally around the energy we built as a community and celebrate the fun of Slow Fish as we head toward virtual Slow Fish 2021 next March. And we'll share more about that later. So let's step back a bit and take a look at 2020 and sigh. This year continues to find new ways to surprise and sometimes dismay us. But one of the most startling yet revealing realizations is that we now find ourselves at a food systems crossroads. The huge industrial supply chain that made food a globalized commodity essentially broke down last spring. Finding standard proteins and produce became a challenge. However, essential workers like local farmers and fish harvesters who already had established some form of direct sales within and around their communities thrived. Their operations experienced rapid, massive growth simply by doing what they've always been doing. Sure, they faced logistical hurdles, addressing sometimes double and triple digit growth simply because folks in and around their communities returned to their roots as hunter-gatherers, finding food close to the source and close to them. But these food producers' resilience was founded on an ability to develop more direct relationships with their customers. And that resilience helped them adapt where industrial supply chains couldn't. So today we're going to hear stories from those whose markets have grown with direct sales or otherwise adapted to the shift toward a localized economy. We'll hear what they're doing to expand their operations and bring more people into the conversation about locally sourced seafood. We'll also hear stories of indigenous subsistence traditions and the communities built on that connection with the resource. And we'll explore which narratives and business models are worth replicating elsewhere to continue changing the direction of our local seafood systems. And if you'd like to pose a question to one of our panelists, please use the chat button at the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best to get to as many of your questions as we can. And we know you may want to provide input today, and that's great. Just remember that part of the safety of this forum, aside from the fact that we're all at least 1 fathom apart, if not 6,000 fathoms, means that all comments should be thoughtful and respectful and posted in a sense of healing and unity. So let's jump in and get ready to crew together. First, we'll hear from Hillary Rennick and Noah Washkabushkuk about tribal subsistence, traditional foods, and community resilience. Hillary and Noah?
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Thanks for joining us today. We have a presentation on tribal subsistence and community resilience. And first of all, I'm Homo Paiute from Northern California, the northwest part of California, the Redwoods, Salmon people, Abalone people, and I like the fact that this is a call to action. So hopefully some of the issues, the items that we would bring today will cause people to provoke to have some positive response out of this. So here's the roadmap. So, you know, there is the land acknowledgement. And I do want to acknowledge, of course, we're all living on tribal people's lands, historical lands, Aboriginal lands, but also I really want to state that most Native peoples, do not have the title to these lands. And that becomes an issue with food, subsistence issues. Not having the title, being displaced, you know, causes food insecurity. And so that's an important part of the land acknowledgement process. Of course, always be aware of the history of the places that you inhabit, the places that you go gather, the places that you fish. It's always important to respect that natural system. And so with also, usually I talk about land, air, water, and cultural resources. And then with that is the sacred landscapes and the linkage to traditional foods, and that everything is connected. And the photo to the right is Noah with 3 abalone. We harvest our traditional foods in Northern California, which is very similar all the way up Southeast Alaska to Northern California. I've harvested similar foods in South Africa, in Australia, New Zealand, and has studied, we also get nearshore species with like seaweeds, and have gathered seaweed in Ireland. So one of the issues, we often overlook is the fact that there's this huge intertribal trade network. And so this is a trade network, thousands of years old, and this still exists to a certain level, despite removal, despite the reservation system, that we still trade, just as you maybe at your local farm, your local village, you might trade with your neighbor, your friends. This tribal network still exists. Talking about the land in Northern California, we don't have the title to places such as the Geysers geothermal field, which is the largest geothermal field in the world, with 18 geothermal plants. It was often a sacred site. And with COVID and other world issues that get our attention when the earth is calling out, the geysers were a sacred space where people would go and go to the hot springs, in between, as they're traveling, people would travel, the fishermen would travel inland to gain subsistence from the inland species, and also to heal themselves. Again, the intertribal trade networks are extensive. There's large centers spanning, the cultural boundaries, of course, do not follow political boundaries. So, if you're in Washington State and the Straits of Georgia, that's one system. When you harvest salmon, you're talking about transboundary resources there. I'm also a fire archaeologist. I've been busy with the wildfires in California, and the items that we find in these prehistoric sites align with our oral history, the history of this trade network. Finding, abalone in archaeological sites in Wisconsin, in Santa Fe, and Louisiana, and also finding Minnesota pipestone, in California. A lot of the tangible resources are not found in the sites because, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, but just the extensive trade network, which included food, the food sources, is still alive today. So again, with myself as a California Indian, that I also deal with the invisibility of modern Indians. So it's frustrating when we're often pushed to the past, because we are in the present and we're going to be in the future. But what does that future look like? Of course, nothing is static. Culture is always moving and evolving. And so, trying to figure out in humankind, it's 2020, there's a lot going on, politics, different policies that affect our food sources, people forming and reforming our group dynamics. On screen right now, I have just the basics of what I see in the archaeological sites, California, with the abalone species, the many species. I'm primarily in my area. My number one abalone species is the red abalone. which of course is a subsistence issue. The fisheries are, you know, stressed because of the environmental issues happening out in the ocean. The weather changes, just like everything else. You know, the salmon species, we're seeing all these issues close to home, especially with people that depend on traditional foods. Water, you know, in California, we have the Central Valley Water Project, which is, you know, the water is taken from Northern California down to the LA basin. Water is grouped, regrouped, dammed, and it affects, of course, the fish, the water quality, and everything about our food system. Let's see. Again, with the interconnectedness, you know, sometimes people will ask about, you know, being, what, as a traditional person or a traditional food gatherer, subsistence person, you know, how do we fit into the legal scheme? And so Indian people, we are in the Constitution, you know, talks about the Commerce Clause. The commerce at the time of the Constitution was with us, was with tribal nations. So we are part of that original meaning under the law. And so Noah will take over from here.
Yeah, and a lot of this that we're talking about is food sovereignty, you know, and finding these food sources where they may be. And a lot of it has barriers, and sustainable harvesting is like one of the biggest ones for all of us, you know, those who fish and those who hunt and gather. And that's one of the barriers, is people cutting plants or uprooting without, I guess, harvesting correctly, so it won't grow back the next year. So them are kind of the barriers with that. And other things is the traditional environmental knowledge, you know, knowing when the food is ready, where is it accessible, can you get to the place, and a lot of that has to do with restricted access by either the state or landowners. And let's see, for many of us tribes, my tribe specifically, we were relocated from the Great Lakes, and that is the Potawatomi people. There's several others that remained behind, but for us that had to move through the removal, we were unfamiliar with the area, and kind of those foods that we were accustomed to, it kind of affected the physical, mental, and spiritual connection. And as for many California tribes that were terminated, they do not retain the access to accustomed areas. So it's just some of the few barriers when it comes to, I guess, food sovereignty and finding where your next meal is coming from.
So actionable items, you know, maintaining relationships, folks reaching out to tribes to see, you know, like, do they want to exchange, you know, and then easements, you know, if there's traditional foods or if there's fishing access on private property that you know about, just, you know, partnering with the tribe to help the tribe get access.
Well, thank you both, Hillary and Noah, for sharing such an important story about Indigenous access, cultural tradition, food sovereignty, and the importance of supporting community. I love seeing that map, by the way. The Intertribal Trade Network suggests how important relationships matter, just as you said, Hillary. And that's something we're going to be hearing, I think, throughout this conversation. So now we're going to hear from Anna Shillum, who's actually on her boat, and she's seen the seafood supply chain from multiple perspectives as consumer, restaurant manager, and now a harvester, selectively choosing wild oysters, clams, and mussels from in and around Wilmington, North Carolina for her restaurant clients. So Anna?
Hi, my name is Anna Shellum, and I am a commercial fisherman and fish dealer here in North Carolina. I started a company called Shellum Seafood about 4 years ago. I left the restaurant world because fishing was the happiest. It made me happier than anything else that I've ever done. So I wanted to get my own niche, harvesting specifically just shellfish, clams, oysters, mussels, and stone crab, and sustainably harvesting them across the board. Nobody else gets to touch my fish. I pluck it from the sea per order per chef. So there's zero waste. Everything is packaged, sold all by me, and I deliver it to chefs that really do some incredible things with it. So I know that I'm honoring the product. No one else here in North Carolina is harvesting wild mussels. Maybe there's one other person, but it's really, really neat to be able to supply a product that is new to the restaurant world and to local people here. Before COVID, I had about 28 restaurant accounts that I harvested for on a regular basis. And once COVID hit, since my whole heart was in the restaurant world and supplying to them, everything, there was nothing that I could do. And during this time, I thought about doing the retail side of things, but I am a one-woman operation. I do it completely by myself. Like he said, we live on our boat. We try to live sustainably in general, and respecting the earth and respecting the sea. So Mother Nature has always taught me that you just have to be patient, and she's always going to be in charge. Once restaurants started to open up around here for phase 2, that's when hurricane season came and rain came. And since I'm just shellfish, I was unable to harvest. So being patient for these 7 months has been incredibly hard, but I took the time to perfect my craft and fall in love with fishing all over again, because I had the time to do it. And it was one of the most empowering things to know that I could always feed my family because of my profession. I also adore cooking. And so I've been working on a fisherman's cookbook for just what I do during this time, and sharing with friends and with those in need. But this oyster season starts tomorrow for wild. Everything I harvest is wild. I don't do anything farmed. It's finally like the light at the end of the tunnel. There's finally hope that I can support my family and make money again and feed people and work with my chefs and share these beautiful products that are harvested with intention always. Nothing, like I said, there's truly zero waste, which makes me feel really good. I've made several beers with some people in Charlotte. We made a mussel beer and an oyster beer. So in 3 weeks, I'm going to start production of that again. That's Free Range Brewery in Charlotte. And it's amazing what can be done with these 4 products that I get to supply. I've been working for years to try and figure out how to catch stone crab by hand. So that's been really fun to truly master over this time. Waiting till the tide drops low enough so I can go to their nests at the ends of the oyster beds and wake them up from their from their sleep, and just take one claw. And then they eat a lot of clams, so sometimes I'll put clams in their nests if I took their really big claw. I love knowing that what I do is the right way, in my opinion, to share shellfish with my community. During this time, I could have gone out and just harvested as much as I could and just to make money, but I didn't start fishing because of the money. I don't think any of us do. So it's been incredibly tough, but I'm really glad that I waited it out in order to maintain my sustainable practices and not rape the sea, and wait till I can put that shellfish in hands that will highlight it to the level it deserves, and that people will be excited to eat it, and it's not going to sit in someone's truck or on someone's freezer shelf or refrigeration and go to waste, because it's too beautiful to waste, for sure. I think this has been a good time to rebudget, and I think that my husband and my cholesterol levels are through the roof because we've been eating a lot of shellfish, and I'm so eager and excited for the world to get back open so I can continue to have my name Shellum on menus and bring people the freshest product that is in my little neck of the woods here. Everything is delivered within 24 hours of being harvested. So before COVID, I was working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, it felt like. I drive and deliver it all myself in Charlotte, Little Washington, Kinston, Raleigh. And it's the most fulfilling, most rewarding job I've ever had. And I'm sure that there will be more blessings that will come out of this ridiculously stressful pause on all of our lives, that when I'm hustling again this winter and in the spring, you know, I can look back and be thankful for this time to have reconnected with the earth and the sea and learn new tactics and approach it with the love that I did to begin with and not the pressure of sales. So that's kind of a beautiful thing that came out of it. My husband owns a bar and it's been shut down the whole time and is still shut down. So I'm going to take him out harvesting with me, which is kind of some pressure lifted off my shoulders. And it's going to be really neat to share the marsh with him and get back to my chefs. I'm really thankful to be a part of this. So thanks for letting me talk. Sorry, it's a ramble, but I love the organization. I'm proud to be here.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I guess we got the transition right here, coming from the stories that Hillary and Noah shared about, you know, essentially living in harmony with the resource, and then you doing exactly that, taking care of the resource so that you can bring that forward. And that's, again, another message that we're bringing forward. Now, Anna and I were set to collaborate on a sustainable seafood dinner at our friend Chef Keith Rhodes' Catch Restaurant in Wilmington 2 years ago. But of course, Hurricane Florence had other ideas. So hopefully we can make that happen when the dust settles from COVID and pack the house with people and mussels.
Yes, I would love that. I can't wait.
Next, we're going to hear from Caper Cannell, a rod and reel tuna fisherman from Rye, New Hampshire, who's thinking about the supply chain from a shelf-stable perspective. Caper?
Mute myself. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks again, Collis, for inviting me. My name is Caper Cannell. I am a 41-year-old fisherman from Rye Harbor, New Hampshire, which is halfway between Portland, Maine and Boston. I fish primarily just east of the Isles of Shoals. I dayboat fish for giant bluefin tuna, which many of you know are popular for trophy and Japanese market. In the past few years, I've taken upon myself to challenge the traditional supply chain, which seems to be a common theme here with this panel, where I no longer a part of the traditional consignment method of I would go out and catch a fish, somebody would come and pick it up, and then a month later I would hope to get a check. And that would either go to Japan or it would go to California or New York City or thereabouts. What I've done is I've taken some of the traditional methods of canning and preserving bluefin tuna and played around with it for a few months last year and realized that I was onto something. And fast forward to this year, July, I started catching fish, and now I have a can line, which is taking off in its own trajectory. I have really good response on the local restaurants here in town in Portsmouth. I'm doing some online sales, and there is a large company out of Boston that is engaged with me right now. So there's a lot of promise there. but the canned industry or preserved industry is really, I would say it's the zeitgeist of America right now, where people are realizing that you don't have to eat fish fresh. You can take it at the height of its harvest, height of its quality, and you can smoke it, or you can salt it, or you can put it in a can with some olive oil, as I have done, which is very similar to the Mediterranean methods. Some of the things that I mean, you should know a little bit about me, is that I grew up in the restaurant business. My parents had a restaurant for 30 years outside of DC, in a small town called Shepherdstown, West Virginia, on the Potomac. And then they also had 2 restaurants here in Portsmouth in the 90s. And so I represent a little bit of both, similar to Anna, where I've got some skin in the game on the finish end, on the consumption end, but also on the harvest end. So I'm truly a part of all industry. So I get to talk with a lot of chefs, a lot of purveyors, and people that really enjoy food and food trend and understand what I'm doing here. And one of the big themes that I feel is coming up is that it's a broadening of our palate as a culture, as a societies in different regions. When we say that all the seafood has to be fresh, it limits the scope of who gets access to it, but it also limits the time frame of when you can use it. So canning is an old method. I'm not doing anything new, but I'm just raising that method, or the vessel, and it's wonderful stuff. You can eat it for breakfast and lunch and dinner, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. And it's the bluefin tuna is something that has sort of the king of sushi, but it deserves a little bit more than just eating fresh, because it's a delicious fish. It's very fat, it's rich, and it goes well with everything from eggs to beans to salad. Yeah, I eat it quite a bit. And I'm just excited to be a part of it. So I do have a website, and I think there's some information there available. I'm available to talk to anybody. I'm always willing to listen to suggestions. I need help. So thanks again, Collis.
Well, thank you, Caper. You know, certainly the past several months have forced us to rethink shelf life, you know, how we preserve seafood. And so, you know, kudos to you for reinvigorating and sort of reintroducing the Spanish and Portuguese tradition of conservas here, because I think it's a great idea and something that is good for you know, broadening our palates, which is also part of living, you know, in tandem, in harmony with the ecosystem. So,
yeah. And if I do have a little bit more time, just a real quick second, is that when a species is at a good management, you end up having more of it locally available, readily available. So if a species is only built for an export market, the local communities never get a chance to experience it. And this is another example of a way to provide access on a prolonged scale. You know, like, again, more shelf life, so more people get to experience it, as opposed to it just going onto an airplane and going over to Tokyo, or going to a large city where it can be used in sushi. So
absolutely. Again, it broadening palates and diversifying and you know, democratizing that as well. And that's all important. That's all part of this conversation of, you know, evolving the supply chain. So now we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to let Luz Nieri from Colombia bring us some poetic balance to the conversation. Juliana Zarate, who's co-founder of Mucho Colombia, will introduce us to Luz and translate the poem.
Hi, everyone. Just trying to see if we can get Luz Neri in camera. My name is Juliana. I'm originally from Colombia, but currently based in California. I work with sustainable fisheries in both Colombian and Caribbean and Pacific, mostly in the Pacific, showcasing culture and biodiversity. And Luz Neri, one of the fishing women who we work with, is here with us today from the Colombian Pacific, from an area called Timbiquí, a beautiful area, probably with one of the most diverse cultural and biological diversities in the world. So I'm just hoping, I know they're connected. There she is.
She just needs to unmute.
There she is. Hola, Luz Neri.
Hola,
¿Cómo está?
muy bien, gracias.
Aquí la estoy presentando. So I'm just telling her that I'm presenting her. Si quiere presentarse usted, hablar un poquito de quién es.
Bueno, yo soy Luz Neri Flores Chalá y vengo de la comunidad de San Miguel del Río. Soy presidenta de la organización El Cebollado.
So she's saying she's Luz Neri Flores Chalá from San Miguel del Río, Timbiquí, and she's the president of the female community-led organization called El Cebollal.
Sí, como lo que hacemos, lo que estamos trabajando es en artesanía, entonces quise traer este mate, que es un plato, y esta copa para presentárselas, para que se den cuenta de lo que estamos, qué es lo que hacemos.
So she brought with her also some of the artisan that they're making from the tutumo, which is a traditional tree, where they sell more of their traditional fishing dishes. Entonces, Luz Neri, si quiere compartir un poquito de lo que hacen en comida y el verso que escribió.
Listo. Bueno, nosotras somos 23 mujeres que trabajamos por la misma causa. Sembramos plantas medicinales y alimentarias y hacemos comidas para vender en la cabecera municipal. En especial tenemos un plato que es el quebrado de Muchía.
So she's saying there are 23 women. They harvest both fish, but also medicinal plants. That is one of the biggest local knowledges to prepare foods that they sell to the local people in the, how it works, Timbiquí is like a connection of little tiny towns connected by river and the ocean. So they have to move by boat. Luz Neri came by boat today to join us from the main little town. And this is where she is today, where she usually cooks with the other 23 women.
Traje un verso que, bueno, es una copla y dice: las señoras y señoras somos una berraquera, por sus platos y sus mates, muy lejas vamos a llegar.
So this is her first part of her copla, which is like a local type of poetry. So she's saying the ladies and ladies are here to present with their bowls and spoons that are taking her this far.
También tengo otra copla, son 3, 4.
Siga.
Somos mujeres unidas que luchamos por lo mismo, tratando de recuperar los saberes ancestrales.
We're women that work together, working for the same, recovering our knowledge, our ancestral knowledge, to showcase to everyone. I'm sorry if my translation it doesn't make any justice to how beautiful it sounds.
You're doing great.
Y la tercera.
También queremos decirles que lejos vamos a llegar para ayudar a nuestros hijos y a nuestra comunidad.
We're here to tell you that this is what we've come to do, to work hard to get far for our children and our community.
Hay otra copla
Siga.
Queremos capacitarnos en nuestras artesanías para exportar los productos hay con mucha gallardía.
We want to keep on learning to improve our craft so we can export what we do to everywhere worldwide. And this is the first time Luz Neri is actually joining an international Zoom. So she wanted to say like a little message. Luz Neri, aquí están conectados en Estados Unidos, pero también gente de otros países. ¿Qué quisiera contar o decir?
Bueno, yo les quiero contar el proceso de trabajo que nosotras tenemos y por qué lo hacemos. Nosotras sembramos plantas medicinales y alimentarias con ganas de recuperar lo ancestral, porque nuestros padres, nuestros abuelos, pues ellos, eso es lo que trabajaban, la artesanía, la agricultura, y hoy en día pues la juventud ya eso lo desconocen, ya no quiere trabajar más la agricultura, ya no quiere sembrar más las plantas. Entonces nosotros estamos trabajando como grupo de mujeres para recuperar esas cosas que ya se están perdiendo. Lo hacemos porque sabemos que anteriormente, pues los padres de nosotros, nuestros abuelos los criaron con la medicina tradicional y ellos también nos criaron a nosotras con la medicina tradicional. Muchas veces nos enfermamos y no nos llevaban al hospital porque pues los médicos eran un poco escasos. Pero con las plantas, pues nos mejorábamos. También las comidas que ya se están perdiendo, especialmente que el pandado, que el sancocho de pan, que el yuyo, que el quebrado. Entonces nosotras como grupo de mujeres lo estamos recuperando, porque son comidas sanas y no llevan nada de químico. Por lo menos lo que nosotros hacemos es todo natural. No trabajamos con nada de químico y mucho menos con magui.
So she's just saying that the message that she would like to give is that her and the other women are a working community to recover their ancestral knowledge, which has been lost in young people. So they're working hard, particularly in plant medicine and also in fisheries and cooking books. So perhaps they can do a cookbook with Anna. Cooking books around preserving different ways to eat fish and plants, traditional knowledge, so it doesn't get lost and it gains a position in the world. Gracias, Luz Neri. Ahorita después volvemos a conectar.
Bueno, muchas gracias a ustedes.
I'd just like to say that was beautiful. Muchas gracias, Luz and Juliano. That was just wonderful. And again, striking back on the chord of preserving cultural tradition and knowledge. This is really important, establishing that relationship and keeping it. So bless you both, and thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to now hear from Alan Lovewell, who launched the Real Good Fish community-supported fishery in Monterey Bay, California in 2012. And the past several months have seen extraordinary growth and presented a new set of challenges, but also an opportunity to bring more folks into the conversation about locally sourced seafood. Alan?
Alice and Brett and everyone in the Slow Fish family, thanks for bringing me on board to speak today. It's been awesome to hear everyone's stories. Such a remarkable time, obviously. So started Real Good Fish back in 2012, and really sort of the core of my story and narrative here is just focusing again, not just now in terms of the times with COVID and how we've all had to respond, but sort of speaking to that strength that we all have as smaller businesses, as creatives, as, value thinkers, and people trying to bring more value to our communities, that being nimble now more than ever has been one of the most important strengths And I think a lot of us share that. And so, starting with how we were formed, we started out of the back of a 100, 200 square foot restaurant, cutting, packing, delivering our own seafood. And we did that for a year or two. Outgrew that restaurant and moved into a community kitchen. From there, went from a community kitchen to a processing facility where we leased out part of the space. And the real big shift that, again, speaks most strongly to the current times was last year in July and August, having one of my drivers quit to get back onto a squid boat. And, at that time we had 9 routes, 4 different vehicles on the road, a bunch of drivers to, do all those deliveries. And, this driver left, and I got to thinking, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to hire drivers. I don't want to build a company that, as I was seeing it around me, you see it in the produce space, you see it in the meat space, you see it in the seafood space, a lot of folks, and, this is no judgment by any means, but, building really strong distribution companies in what they were doing. I was watching these seafood companies and driving on the road and seeing their fleets of vehicles on the road. And, thinking to myself, is that what I want to build here? Like, is that what we're all about? Is that what Real Good Fish's value and energy is going to be spent doing? And realize that wasn't what we wanted to do, that we didn't want to build this really robust distribution company that was focused in on, getting people seafood via our own vehicles. And so we shifted from the delivery fleet to using mainline shippers, and it was a huge relief. I mean, obviously there were some learning curves and there were some challenges associated with figuring that new system out, because it's not like distribution goes away, it's just not as immediately responsible for us. It's something that we have to find a partner who we trust to take care of that last mile. And there's packaging concerns, and there's again, like scheduling concerns, and but what it did was allow us to, again, focus our time and energy into the stuff that we really love to do, which was working with fishermen, working and doing value-added things, thinking about the ways in which we tell story, the way in which we promote the values of our seafood, and let a big chunk of the logistics get handled elsewhere. That said, we still are on the front end of the supply chain picking up seafood, so we still do have vehicles on the road, but it's just not to the extent that we did before. So that was a really major shift that we were prepared for, again last year in August, not knowing coming into March that was going to be a game changer for us, because as we all know, COVID came around and really shook things up, and really to our advantages, a lot of the advantages the folks in these conversations, people were starting to focus their energy and attention to their communities, and that included the food. And I think we all were lucky to, experience something that honestly none of us could have created on our own or even together. I mean, like, what has happened is really been something crazy. And it's hard to say that, obviously, because it's been at the cost of a lot of things. But in the conversation of food and what we all do, I think there's a silver lining, so to speak. So the other amazing thing that happened, is that with all these restaurants coming offline, there is an abundance of chefs and sous chefs and restaurant workers who were looking for work. And in this growth that we were experiencing, we found that there's a lot of people who have a lot of expertise in food who are looking to do good work. And obviously it's in a different setting, but the people in the crew that we have working with us now are incredible cooks and chefs and are now working directly, with the ingredients that they were sourcing before, which is really kind of remarkable. And when it comes to value added, it's been awesome to see, their creativity come into play and start to thinking about the new products that they can make with the ingredients that we're bringing in on a regular basis, how to reduce food waste, how to turn some of the carcasses into, value added product, how to, we've launched a whole burger line of all these different burgers utilizing the scrapings and the trimmings of fish, to make these delicious, ready to eat, easy products that people can just throw on the skillet or on the barbecue and make a quick dinner. So that, the chef element has been really kind of interesting. And, with it all, just sort of focusing on, again, not only what was working, but what the world was needing right now. And what we saw was, people were sheltering in place and needed really good food at home. So, we were in a great position to do that. The other thing I'll speak to is, beta tray. And I think similar to a lot of folks here, everyone is very multidimensional. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this group. But similarly, we have our beta tray program, which has been well regarded. And COVID shut down our schools. And we, approached the schools, seeing what we can do to help. But they were dealing with a lot more of their own internal issues regarding what they were going to do in response to COVID, not necessarily concerned about how were we going to get local fish into the cafeterias, into the food service. So we put that on hold. And, we did have some excess supply, and we figured out that by working with some of the food banks, we could get some of that supply to the communities via donation. And we did that early on. We also were devastated by fires, which was a nice little twist, on the West Coast for all the fun stuff going on these days. And, having to think about how we're contributing to those efforts and feeding those displaced families. And so there's some really great response that came out of that. And we were lucky to, be able to help and contribute in that manner. The last thing, I'll speak to is, I'm also a commercial fisherman. I started commercial fishing 2 years ago. This is about to end my second season here, and that tanked. And as you all know, fishing industry was devastated because so much of it was oriented towards restaurants and food service, and the fish that I catch, live market fish, were all destined and historically destined for restaurants. And so, that market shut down. It's starting to wake up again. The market is there. I'll be fishing on Friday, and, the price has been suppressed. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but we've just experienced, what's been happening in so many different angles. It's been a roller coaster for the good and the bad. And, but, being nimble, being resilient, being creative, staying in, paying attention to where the opportunities are and where the need is been, I think, one of the greatest, strengths that we've been able to hone in on. So, I leave it to everyone to think about sort of your unique place and your unique community and the unique products that you hold, and figuring out, again, that who you are and how you're doing business last year is probably not how you're doing it now, and may not be how you're doing it next year into 2021, and to start thinking creatively about how, you in your position, doing what you do, hearing some of the stories already about the transitioning and adaptation has been remarkable. And I think it's such an important thing for us to embrace.
Well, thanks, Alan. And yeah, adaptation is survival these days, and certainly Real Good Fish did the pivot, as much as I hate that term, but you all adapted to, what the new paradigm shift was going to be, and, made it so that you were in a good position to accept that growth that came in with more people looking for locally sourced, responsibly harvested seafood. So to that extent, you got yourself in a good place to do it. And we'll probably talk more about that during the Q&A. So now we'll hear from Thibaut Josse, community organizer with Plein Mer, an organization in France working to support community-based fish harvesters and simple supply chains. So Thibaut, can you share your story, please?
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me and maybe see me. I'm in my car right now because I'm on the field working with fishers and I'm going back to the next harbor. But just maybe a few seconds to present you what Plein Mer is. Plein Mer is an organization of small-scale fishers and fish consumers who want to work together for building community-supported fisheries and encourage transition through a fair and sustainable fisheries. So this organization is pretty new. Our work began only in 2019. And our first action was to make a map of all the community supported fisheries, direct selling, short value chain market of fish that you could find on the coast. And we now have a map with around 250 points, which represents around 800 fishers. And our goal is to transform this map into a proper app in the future. I guess this webinar is supposed to be more around COVID issues on community supported fisheries. The situation has been pretty hard in France during the COVID experience and the confinement, which was, let's say, between March and June. Because basically the system is pretty simple to understand. You have when the fisher comes back from the sea, you have two options: either a fish auction, either to sell your fish directly to consumers. So most of the fishers still use the fish auction, at least for part of the catch. But and in the fish auction, you have like basically fish marketers. But these fish marketers actually sell the fish in Spain, Italy, in France as well, but a lot of it is sold in Spain and Italy. And those two countries were really impacted by COVID. So the markets were closed there. There was no market for fishing products in Spain and Italy. And so the marketers had to disengage from the French market. And they were not buying the fish, or they were buying it, but for really, really low price, until like 10 times less than usual. So some of the fish auction had to close because there was nothing was sold. There was no prices, there was no market. And most of the fishers couldn't sell their fish. So some had already like community supported fisheries opportunities before COVID and were already using direct selling and were not too much impacted by that and could quickly just like engage more with the consumer and stop selling in the fish auction. But for some of them, it was pretty tricky because they were not using direct selling or community supported fisheries at all. And it's funny because in the moment where no one was actually working, fishers were not going at sea, I was actually on the phone all the time with fishers who needed to know like how to build other systems and to build direct selling. So there was so much examples that I could share, but basically one is pretty interesting. It's in the Basque Country, so it's southwest of France. And in this part of France, it's been a long time that fishers want to do direct selling, and some of them already do. But there was a lot of conflicts around direct selling because of the fish marketers who didn't want fishers to make a profit. And so it's been a long time. I have a really good group of fishers in Saint-Jean-de-Luz in the Basque Country, but it's been a long time they are frustrated about not being able to properly build community supported fisheries in their harbor. And in that moment, the fish auction closed, like in some other places, but they wanted to keep on working, and people wanted to eat fish. So there is a local organization called Slow Food, but from the Basque Country, the local Slow Food, and they have a big network of restaurants. And in that moment of lockdown, the restaurants were closed. So what they decided to do is that some of the restaurants were used as a point where to gather fish baskets, and then people could just come and take their fish basket during a few hours in the day. And so they could just like comment directly to the fisher. The fisher would just fish what is needed if he can. And then he would just pose a few baskets in the restaurant, and people were just coming to the restaurant and paying for the fish. So there was actually big solidarity between restaurants and fishers during this lockdown period, which is kind of funny because most of the time fishers have bad experiences with restaurants when they sell their fish to them because they don't pay, or they don't pay as good as the fisher would like to. So that was really interesting to see this collaboration between them. And now what we want to do is to make this system a long-term system, because after the COVID, people quickly went back into their habits and went back to the supermarket or shit like this. So the fishers were pretty disappointed to see that maybe 75% of their clients just stopped buying fish. And we would like to, but I mean, this experience shows us that there is interest in community-supported fisheries in this particular fishing village. There are fishers motivated, there are restaurants wanting to support. So there are things happening. And we want to work on a project next year to build like a proper fisher cooperative that would manage this direct selling, that will rent, because restaurants have to work. They cannot be like a deposit point all the time, only work during lockdown. So a proper place where fisher could pose their fish, all the infrastructure is needed so that this community supported fisheries can exist in this particular place. So that's more or less it, like an experience we had during the COVID, and that we want to move forward to something that is not like made in the urgence, but properly done. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Thibault. And that raises a good point. We want to extend these kinds of connections. We want it to be something that's more permanent rather than just a transient transition during, a pandemic-inspired paradigm shift, just an entire shift. So we want to make something long-lasting, and this is something that we'll get to probably in the Q&A as well. Speaking of which, I want to encourage everybody here to pose some questions. Now you've got this great panel in front of you. Here's your chance to ask questions. So go ahead and do that in the chat section, and we'll turn them around in the Q&A coming up shortly. So now we're going to hear from Juliana Zarate the second time after she did such a fabulous job as a translator. And she's going to tell us a little more of the story behind the community-based fish harvesters, such as Luz Nieri, and also this wonderful story of working with artisanal fish harvesters like Luz in such a rural, underfunded community to help them bring their product to market in a more sustainable and less complicated way. So, Juliana?
Hi again. So my company is called Mucho, a lot. I think it comes from Alice in Wonderland as well, from muchness, from not losing that childhood enchantment at things and thinking everything is possible. We work in sustainable food, both fisheries, agriculture, and wild harvested food in Colombia, South America, working mainly with indigenous, black-led and farming smallholder communities that usually don't receive a fair pay for what they do, but who actually are the keepers of culture secrets of how to manage and understand better diversity. We've been working for 1.5 years in the Pacific with small fisheries, learning from their trade, and as Cole said, helping them go to market, doing everything from logistics to marketing and setting up an internet platform to sell from currently 66 different and like fisheries and farmers, entrepreneurs across the country, making sure that all the process is sustainable. Most of what we did during COVID, we started realizing not only that there was a lot of food surplus being stuck that we needed to help move and donate, but it was also understanding that in the areas we work with, one of the key issues was water, the lack of it and the lack of clean water that was affecting the communities we work with, but also the possibility for them to be able to sell their product in high standards. So we worked to tell their story alongside people like Luz Neri, making internet videos and campaigns to activate our customer base to help raise funds for the cause, but also working with other organizations such as Conservation International or USAID to get them to sit at the same table, as we say, and be able to build a center in an area called Guapi, just in a neighboring town to where Luz Neri is, for another female organization. So they would have not only clean water to process their fish, but they could also have comply with all the laws from the country, so they can become a sustainable business rather than just to be a small business. Like, we're very happy to see them grow. At the end of the year, this process would have finished, complying with all the regulations and also with all the precautions that COVID has taught us, like especially with water, because there's illegal mining. We needed to know, is there mercury? We needed to know, do we need to be knocking on the door of the government for what they're responsible for? And how do we channel funds to this type of organizations that not only usually don't speak the language of like people funding this stuff, but people that don't have access to communication sometimes. So part of what I want to show today is a video we did with Luz Neri's community called Ladies and Ladies, Señoras y Señoras, to showcase their knowledge, how they live, their community. And on the back of that, we launched a campaign for the fish consumers to be able to donate funds to support their business. So I think Jennifer has the link of the trailer.
Este plato para nosotras significa todo. Que se den de cuenta que estas negras de acá, de este río que ha sido tan afectado por muchas cosas, estemos presentando allá nuestras cosas que nosotros hacemos acá, nos sentimos orgullosas. Sí, que nosotros también tenemos sus saberes.
So that is just a very small trailer, but in Facebook, you can have the link. We have the full 12 minutes. So it showcases the recipe, the work they do with their traditional knowledge. It also showcases poetry, the different parts of culture. And the video was a big success. So we had almost 300,000 views, like almost 500,000 on the first week, with barely like little to no advertising or publishing. I think it shows the power of storytelling and communities being able to tell their own stories. And on the back of that, like they've managed to receive funds all throughout the COVID season. So our work a bit like Alan was saying, our work during COVID has shifted to a bit more of activism, on not only business, because we realized that during the time of COVID, like just selling wasn't enough, especially if we were working in these areas, rural areas, with little access to resource.
So I thank you so much, Juliana. I think, you know, one thing that struck me is that being able to, as you said, you had to take the activist role, and doing so to the point where you could get a government that had been kind of on the side, not really helping out, to actually activate them and get them to work collaboratively with other organizations in order to make this happen.
I think we're only at the beginning, but at least they're used to hearing from us now. And I think they're used to the fact that if they're gonna hear from the communities on social media as well. So I think that definitely has shifted things around.
Well, you have to apply pressure wherever you can in order to make things happen. And that's what you're doing. So kudos to you for changing the conversation and bringing change that you know, is enabling these communities to be more effective.
Thanks.
So, you know, it's a great story. So now we're going to start the Q&A. And again, we invite everyone to chime in on the chat or the Q&A part of the discussion. And we'll get the questions as best we can. One of the questions that came in from a slow fish colleague, Lauren Parnell, and I'm gonna start this off with Alan, but we'll sort of work around the panel a bit. And that is, you know, with the major disruption of supply chains, as Alan was talking about, in restaurant markets, what did you learn or adapt on the fly this year that you wish you'd known or thought about ahead of time? So, meaning, you know, what lessons learned about business resilience can you share to help strengthen other members of the network? So I'll start off with you, Alan. Not to put you in the spotlight or anything.
No, it's fine. That's a great question. It's and I think I'm in a unique position to speak again to the fact that I had done some of that thinking before COVID hit. And I think what was really important for me and for this business was to really look inside yourself and look inside of what you're trying to do and maximize the time and energy that you have focused on the things you want to do and the things that you believe in that you're doing as an individual, as a harvester, or you as a small business owner, but to really look at, you know, the things you want to spend your time doing. I appreciated Anna's story about getting so much joy on the water. I mean, that's exactly what I think, you know, you need to have those sort of aha moments, realizations to say, I want to do more of this and less of that and figure it out. And I think everyone here has the unique care and intention associated with the work that they're doing, that they're going to find you're going to work on finding your audience, you're going to work on finding your markets, but, you know, stay true to sort of the things that that resonate with you. And so for that, us, it was getting rid of the distribution side of things that didn't resonate with me. That was not something I wanted to continue to invest time and energy and money into. You know, meeting people where they're at and reaching more people and recognizing there's a lot more seafood on the market now than there's probably ever been, given, you know, that half the market disappeared. You know, that for me is exciting. The idea that we can provide more seafood to more people now because the seafood is there, and it's up to us to tell those stories and to share those values again that we're so passionate about. Right now, the chef component is really interesting. I didn't anticipate that, right? But to be working with more chefs, again, internally as a company, and to be thinking about how do these people who think very deeply about food contribute to this company and the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that was not something that I realized prior to COVID. That was something that during COVID, I was like, that is interesting. If we really are trying to get people to think more deeply about their food, turns out chefs are doing that, but they're so used to working within that environment, within the restaurant environment, within the kitchen environment, with that specific business model. I think COVID kind of happened in a way that forced them to also think about, hey, if I care so deeply about food, I don't have to just do it in a restaurant. I can do it in another type of company. So there was a really interesting interplay there where prior to COVID, I don't know if I could have been as convincing to bring on more chefs as I was post-COVID, when chefs were like, I still want to do my craft, I still want to practice, I still care so deeply about what I'm doing. How else can I do that?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. You're kind of forced to think in a way you hadn't before. And so I'm going to turn it over to Anna. Anna, you know, what lessons did you learn coming out of this, looking back on it in terms of how you were approaching your business, and you know what you would want to know now that you didn't, or wish you had known beforehand?
I think that before COVID, I was really caught up in making sales with, I mean, I think I was just so proud to finally be making money as a fisherman that I was like, let's go, 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 go. And I think getting realigned with just breathing and sleeping at night instead of being worried about, you know, if the northeast wind or the north wind is going to ruin my tide the next day, and just letting things be rather than living in this anxious state that was brought on because of checks that I was given. It's like, I think that it will be a healthier mindset to get back to work. And I think that will be related my product, even with the orders that I've had coming in more recently. I'm getting very specific with what each chef is looking for. The size of certain clams, certain mussels, and allowing myself to, you know, if I find something unique, bring them a sample and just say, hey, what can we do with this? Or how can we make this better? And so I think that this time will increase my, the quality of my product and a more centered, peaceful approach in getting them, and you know, just letting go and letting Mother Nature do her thing. And it's another reason why I like working with chefs, is because they really understand, like, Anna's not being lazy. That tide, like, she can't go swimming for clams in 28 degrees weather. And, you know, they're really understanding with the fact that a wild harvest is never consistent. It's always changing. So I think just accepting change more peacefully is what will happen for me. Sorry if I didn't express that properly.
No, I mean, I think it's great. And it's also part and parcel of doing the type of wild harvest that you do. You have to accept what is given to you.
Right, exactly.
In nature, and it may not be what you expect. So
yes.
Resetting your expectations is probably a very healthy thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's you know, I think that's a good approach, and one that we could all benefit from in these times. Caper, just a minute here to what's your you know,
quick minute. So I feel that this nobody else is doing this on the East Coast, I've learned. So I'm learning as I go. The biggest cost I've got accumulated is logistics, which means getting my raw product into a finished form and then back here. I've had really good success, and I do have an audience, but I feel that there is a false positive that many of the restaurants are reluctant to take a risk on anything new at this point. I feel that some restaurants say, yeah, you know, we'll do this but menus aren't changing the way they would normally month to month or seasonally in some regards. So I feel like I have only reached a small fraction of what I could possibly do. I haven't reached out to farmers markets or CFAs or CFSs. So I'm excited about that, but you know, because there's no cannery within 100 miles from me or 1,200 miles from me on the East Coast, I'm working with companies on the West Coast for legal reasons and also for functionality. But that's my biggest cost. So I hope I answered the question properly, but listening to Alan duking it out over there in Santa Cruz, and even in Colombia, and Anna as well. I mean, we're all faced with the same thing. Restaurants are really the end users in a lot of regards. And if they support it, it's one thing, but I think we're at a small sample of what's to come once we get out of COVID.
I agree, and it's, again, it's a learning process, and we have to be adaptable enough to learn from the process. So another quick question here from Andrea Tomlinson of New Hampshire Community Seafood, which is a community-supported fishery out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And this is for Juliana. How are subsistence and artisanal fishermen and women in Colombia diversifying how they sell during this time frame? How have they changed who they market to? You know, and this sort of speaks to sort of the project that you're working on to building that processing facility.
Yeah, so it's some of them are actually not even able to sell. So back to the point of logistics everybody mentioned, we had to build a logistics supply chain as well, from an area that usually very little gets out from. So that has been a thing. And while we've been doing that, we started marketing as well, not only food, but also digital goods. So people like Lusneri not only did the video, but they also did like a recipe. We did a recipe box, and we did a recipe book, digital recipe book, to create income and diversify their income a bit, because big part of what they own is their culture. So finding content writers all across the world make money out of writing content. So we believe all these communities that own this valuable knowledge can monetize and have a livelihood out of what they know. So that has been one strategy. And another strategy has been moving to smaller cities. Like Colombia is very centralized. So we sell in Bogota. But because of COVID, we had to find other places where we could move produce, just not fish, because it was just almost impossible to move around the country, very especially without just no means of transport, not only through COVID, but because roads don't exist.
But yeah, exactly. It's finding new pathways but making the connection so that, you know, it works for the fish harvesters as well as the end consumer, the seafood eater as well. And that often takes some work, as you're finding out. Yeah. But it's also about telling the story. And this is another thing that I've wanted to touch on. I don't know that we have too much time, but this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, is how do we bring more people into this conversation? That is an essential mission for what we're doing. How do we bring more people into this conversation about where their seafood's coming from, and why the story behind that seafood matters? And so, you know, we're going to be talking about that more, and we'll definitely be talking about that more down the road. But it's something to think about here, and I encourage the conversation to continue, you know, directly with everyone, because it's so important, and it's part of how we move forward with this crossroads, this food system crossroads that we now find ourselves at. And we've heard stories about it, you know, honoring traditional indigenous cultures. We've heard about, you know, adapting to what nature is providing for us in ways that will allow us to operate more efficiently, but more effectively. We've learned about, you know, adapting in ways to change the business model so that it works better for what you're doing. So instead of having a whole fleet of trucks, you change the model so that you remain true to your identity from the outset. And we found ways of collaboration within the Slow Food Network that have worked in order to make drop-offs. It was like essentially a type of CSF drop-off in the Basque region of France. So all of these things are things that we need to keep talking about and sharing within the network and beyond, because that's how we paint the bigger picture. And once we paint the bigger picture, we have less of an issue in butting our heads up against the industrial food supply chain. So yeah, our time is up. I know we could keep talking about this stuff because it is really important and it is really interesting, and we have such a great panel of voices here. And I want to thank everyone for joining the conversation. So as always, let's view this as another platform for further discussion and more community building and more action. In fact, here are 3 concrete action opportunities that everyone can take. And I'd like to add a couple more, extending from the messages from Hillary and Noah. Seek out nearby tribes and ask about trading opportunities. I mean, this is a great potential for a win-win situation. And again, another thing that Noah had mentioned is if you own property with access to fish, consider easements with your nearby tribes. I mean, if there is a resource that's available that can be used and managed properly, as we know that these people who have the cultural traditions do, why not? So these are just some action items to take about, and again, I encourage you to share them, going forward. We'll soon post a recording of this webinar on the Slowfish website. We encourage you to continue the conversation. As I've mentioned, if you'd like to reach out to any panelist, send an email directly to them or to slowfish@slowfoodusa.org, or to other Slowfish team members who have shared their addresses in the chat section. Oh, by the way, Slowfish team members, go ahead and share your email addresses in the chat section. If you'd like to broach questions for the broader community, well then feel free to post them on the Slowfish Fish Locally Collaborative and Local Catch listservs. We'd love to hear from you. So what topics would you like us to dive into in the future? Please, again, email any ideas to slowfish@slowfoodusa.org. Also, we want to put on your radar Slowfish 2021 in March. Yeah, COVID messed things up last spring a lot, but we pivoted. We started these webinars within 10 days, and we want to keep that energy going. So we intend to host a rich, multifaceted, and colorful virtual event that will draw out some of the key programming that we had planned last March. Some things like deep dive discussions on climate change, policy, and industrial aquaculture. You saw Johnny Fishmonger posting something about that in our chat section. We might do some creative events such as chef cook-alongs and amateur fisherman videos and more. Anna's already doing it on her boat. So stay tuned for more info. We'll be posting it on the different listservs. And I'd like to thank today's wonderful storytellers, including Hillary Rennick, Noah Wakwabushkuk, Anna Shellum, Caper Cannell, Luz Nieri, Alan Lovewell, Thibaut Jose, and Juliana Zarate. I'd also like to again thank Wade Fernandez for sharing some powerful music. I want to thank the incredible team that helped plan and execute this webinar series, and this webinar in particular. None of this would have happened without everybody's efforts. So this team included Anna Muley, Brett Tolley, Buck Jones, Denisa Livingston, Gary Granada, Giselle Kennedy Lord, Kelly Collins Geyser, Ian McFall, Jacqueline Ross, Jim McIsaac, Kevin Scribner, Michelle Mesmin, Paula Barbeto for connecting us with Thibaut and Juliana, and Robert Morrison. And there's probably some others that I've forgotten and I'll hear about, but I want to thank them too. Finally, special thanks to One Fish Foundation intern Jennifer Halstead, who wears many hats these days, but serving as the woman behind the curtain, pulling all the magic levers to make this webinar fly. That's one of the chief ones, at least for today. She also makes sure I don't get out of line and kind of has her hands full with that. This webinar has been a co-production of Slow Fish, Slow Food USA, Slow Food Turtle Island, One Fish Foundation, Northwest Atlantic Marine Alliance, Forever Wild Seafood, and Lighthouse Foundation. I'm Collis Stoll, president of One Fish Foundation, asking you all to stay safe, mask up, keep your physical distance, but remember that sense of community we've been talking about. We heal together, we grow together. And also, we grow stronger together, and buy local seafood like wild harvested shellfish or conserva style canned tuna, and responsibly harvested seafood from a community supported fishery. And do as our sister Denise suggests, spread a pandemic of peace, prayer, and positivity. These days, we really need it still. Unfortunately, Wade had to jump off for another meeting, but we do have a video of him. So I'm gonna ask Jennifer if she can cue it up so that Wade can virtually send us out. That was great. Wonder if we can find more music from Wade somewhere. He was great. Again, I want to thank everybody. You all did great. It's a great conversation. and we'll just keep these conversations going, and we'll stay connected. Would love to hear updates from everybody, you know, what's going on and how things are moving forward. Anybody got anything to add? Cool. All right, well, have a good rest of the day, and we'll close this out.